G'day and welcome to part 3 of my 1936 Bush BP5 battery radio. In part 1 I cleaned the chassis up and got the radio working. In part 2 I built a bespoke power supply for its unusual voltages. And today I'll attempt to restore the cabinet and make a new back for it. And I can put it all together and we can test it. It looks like someone's refinished this fairly recently, but unfortunately it's got some big marks on it. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. This has been added at some point. It is broken. It looks awful. It looks like trying to hypnotise you or something. I can get rid of that. The owner's given me carte blanche. I don't know when she's coming around, but that's what he said. So I'm going to just take that out and I'm going to put the grill cloth back in there that was supposed to be there in the first place. There's some really deep marks here. It's gone right into the wood past the veneer. The top here looks like the veneer's missing and they've just put some filler in there. There's another bit there, it's all raised and missing. In order to get a good finish, I'm going to have to strip it back. I've no idea what that's finished in. It's a very dull looking finish. I'll try and make it a little bit better than that. So I'll turn it around and we can take this thing off the back. This is the little turntable or carousel on the bottom there. It's just got little screws along the edges here. It's got Ormond Engineering in here, so maybe I can get a photo and see what was on the original covering there. There's a couple of little clips here that held the wiring for the frame aerial. Take them off. And there's two little hinges here, I'll just take them off as well. I'm trying to get this off without breaking it. There we go. It's only a bit of plastic. There's the little plaque, it's just a license type thing, and this has got 6 valves, this has only got 5. Yeah, not sure what's going on there. I have some paint stripper here. I'm going to paint strip the top. I'll see how that goes and then I'll paint strip the rest. I won't show that on camera because it's just me paint stripping. That has a nice thick layer on it. I'll leave that for half an hour or so and come back and we'll see how it goes. Now I get a lot of suggestions about putting some plastic over it while the stripper works, so I'll put a bit of wrap on it. Now this has been one of my typical half hours. It's probably an hour later. But the plastic should have stayed. No, it's still dried out. No, it's coming off. Oh, that's coming off all right. Very good. So I'll use the plastic a bit more in future. I think this is going to need another coat of stripper. But another comment I had said, get one of these blades, and these are for finishing timber, sort of to smooth them off and remove old paint. That's doing a very good job. I got to say, that's done a fantastic job. It's taken off the last bit of varnish there, the last bit of stripper, and it's back to the timber. And my only complaint is that whoever told me to get one of these didn't tell me earlier, so I'm holding him accountable. In the meantime, I'll put the camera away, I'll continue stripping this back, I'll come back when I've finished and we'll evaluate the damage. I've stripped down the whole cabinet and now I'm going to start doing some repairs. This is the damage on the right hand side of the cabinet. There's some across the grain scratches there and this has just been chewed out as though something's been rubbing on it. I think all I can do there is put filler in there. I can't do anything else. Somebody painted this at one stage, so there's remnants of paint here. Once again, I'll just put filler in there. You won't see that. On the side here there's similar looking deep scratches. This is solid timber. I can only fill that. There's nothing else I can do with that. I can't replace the timber. And of course the top, this is all missing. This veneer that's existing here has been feathered down so fine I'd almost have to cut it back here to get any thickness again. Same up this end. They've both been just sanded back to the ply that's underneath. The only thing I think I can do is re-veneer it. I've got a piece of American walnut here. The grain is very similar and the colour is pretty similar. It's got to go on the top so it won't be next to this and I think I'll get away with it. So I'll glue this on and see how it comes out. I'm ready to put the veneer on. I've sanded this off. I've had to put some 2-part filler in here to try and build it up again. And I've cut a bit of veneer here. So I'm ready to go. It's got a join down the centre, so I'll tape that up. I'm going to use PVA and I'll just use some blocks and clamps to hold it down. I'll put some glue on here. And I've got a scraper now, I'll just make a nice little pattern. should do it. Okay, I've cut a bit of MDF, so I'll put that on top. I also cut a bit of wood to go in here. That should hold it. I'll leave that till tomorrow to dry. This is the turntable off the bottom of the radio. I've undone the nut most of the way. I've just got that last little bit to do. Okay. Alright. There's a lot of ball bearings here, and the track where it runs up here, it's corroded. It's got rust all over it. So I'll be able to smooth that out. Clean this up. It's got grease all over it. The grease is actually still greasy. So I'm going to clean this up. I'll paint strip it and reassemble it with some fresh grease. I've cleaned the plates up and taken the paint off. All I got to do is drop all these bearings in. I put a little line of grease in the track there. All the balls are in. I've cleaned this plate up, put a little bit of grease on there as well, and just a matter of refitting the nut. I couldn't find any information on this, but it looks like it had a white rubber rim around in there, which probably had little ribs on it or something, so I'll see if I can replace it with a bit of rubber. But I'll just put it together and I'll put this aside. It's the next day. I've taken the clamps off. We'll see how it came out. Looks pretty good. I've flipped it over and I'm running along with a nice sharp knife here, and this will trim off the excess. Now I'll just cut through slowly so that it actually cuts it and doesn't tear. I've said before, when you get to the end here, come back the other way so you don't tear the end off. There it is. I'll go and do the other three sides. I'll come back in a minute. I'm cleaning this up with a knife because it's got this little rebate here, or rabbit if you're American. I couldn't sort of cut it close enough to the edge there. There's a bit of glue there. But I'm going in this direction because the grain is sort of heading that way at this particular point. So I'll go this way. If I go the other way, it'll pick up the grain and then try and pull a piece out. I have a bit of sandpaper here. I've taped it onto this block of wood here. Give me a nice square edge there. And I need to now go around and just clean this edge up, and I'll go all the way around with it. But I don't want to put a sanding block with the sandpaper down here. I'll start sanding away at this edge here, which I don't want to do. Now this is going to take me a little while, so you enjoy your cup of tea or coffee, and once again I'll be back in a second. As you saw, I used the router just to finish this. I recut that groove. It was not a very sharp groove. It had been sanded a few times, so I've just cleaned that up and it's looking good now. Looks really good. So what I have to do now, of course, is just sand this top. I've sanded this back with a medium grade paper and it's looking pretty good. I have to run over it with another finer grade and then a finer grade again to finish it. But it's looking good. It feels nice, so it'll be good. You can see here, this is the original colour. Now that's got some stain in it. This is bare wood, it hasn't got anything in it. But it looks pretty good. The grain's a good match, and I think the colour will come up once I stain it all. I've done all this before, so I'm not going to get too involved in it. I'm going to use this Aquacoat Clear wood grain filler. Now, if you've seen me use this before, I just rub it in and you just let it dry for about an hour or so, and then you sand it off, and hopefully it's filled the grain. You can do it a couple of times if you want to, depending on how open the grain is. This one's not bad. The part of the original radio is very tight, so it won't need a lot, but I might give this top bit another coat if I need to. I'll just wipe it back with a scraper just to make sure there's no lumps on there. And it's the same deal with the sides. I'll do the sides as well. Once again, I'll just rub it over the scraper, make sure there's no big lumps. It does dry pretty hard, so it's hard to get the any big lumps off. I'll continue with the rest as usual. I'll come back when I'm finished. This has been drying for about half an hour. I've got some 240 grit sandpaper there, and I've just started to sand it off. And it's coming out alright. It does get the stuff stuck in the sandpaper there, so you've got to keep cleaning it. So I'll get that back to wood again, and it should have filled the grain. I'm going to do the top again, and then I'm going to run over with some, I'll put some 320 on it, that'll go to 400, and I'll even finish it with some 600 and maybe some steel wool. I probably won't do the steel wool. I'll put some stain on it and then rub the stain off with the steel wool. I've finished sanding it. It's very, very smooth. It's very nice. But I'm still going to give it another coat of wood grain filler. I've been down this road before where it looks good, and it still comes up with a bit of grain when you put the finish on. So I'll put another coat on. While the grain filler on the top hardens, I will sand down the grain filler on the sides. There it is. It's all done, and it's come up really well. I'm really happy with it. I've done the top twice, and I've done the front once, and sanded it all back. All the fills that I've done, there was one down here, there's stuff over here. That should disappear, I hope, with the stain on it. So I'm going to leave it overnight, and I've got to get some stain, and I'm going to stain it in the morning, and then I should be able to put some top coats on it later in the day. This has been drying overnight. I'm just going to test a bit of the stain down here. There's some filler in here and a bit of the old timber where the stain hasn't quite come out, plus the new timber. So let's see what happens. The stain I'm going to use is oak, which is quite a nutty looking brown. But it has a little bit of a yellow tinge to it, I think. So I'll just try over here. And that's what it's going to look like. That looks good. So before that dries, that's pretty much what it's going to look like. Yeah, I'm happy with that. A little bit of yellow. The brown, yeah, that looks good. Alright, I'll do the rest of it. I'll just rub it off. I think it's pretty much dried already. That colour looks good. I couldn't make it any lighter than that because the repairs would show too much. I'm not sure what the original colour was. I reckon that's probably pretty close. So I'll do the rest of it, and as usual, come back in a second. I finished the stain. I've put 2 coats of stain on the top just to darken it up a bit. It looks pretty close. It's not too bad. This has got a bit more red in it perhaps than the top. But once the top coat's on, it'll blend it together. You won't notice it. I'll let this dry for half a day, then I've got to put some clear over the top. The cabinet's ready for the top coat. I rubbed it back with a bit of 4-0 steel wool and just took off any little bits of rubbish that might have been there. I've cleaned it off with the gun and a cloth, and then I've run over with a tack cloth, so it's perfectly clean. I've put a mask on. I'll leave the camera on for a bit while I start spraying, then I'll move the camera out. I put about 6 coats on this, and it looks really nice. It's come up nice and shiny, and it's good. There's no real defects in it, so I'm very happy with the finish. The top and the sides here, you can't pick the difference in the 2 timbers, so you know it's perfect. Nobody's going to walk up and say that looks got a different top on it. So yeah, very happy. I've got the speaker out of the radio here, and it's huge. It's about 10, must be maybe 12 inch. It's not without its problems. I'll flip it over. I did some repairs earlier on, and I've just put liquid electrical tape around cracks and weak spots in the cone. Otherwise the cone's pretty reasonable. What's happened is mud wasps have made a nest in here and just filled this up with mud. That's distorted the speaker, and now the cone rubs. I cleaned out in here and tried to get it clear, but what's happened is the mud on here has deformed the cone, so it's off centre now. I need to move it over a little. Now the cone around the top here has come away from the basket, and it's probably rusty in there. Yeah, look. So I'm going to take the cone out. This speaker's a little different. The spider's back here. That's not the same sort of spider we used today where it's sealed. It's still open, but it has 3 nuts holding the spider, and if I undo those, I can take the cone out. There's one nut there. I'll undo that one. Oh, it's not very tight. Just get my finger in there. I need to remove the voice coil wires, so I'll just solder them off. Now theoretically I should be able to just lift that off and leave the cone there. There it is. So here's the basket and here's all the rust in there. I'll put this in the sandblaster, I think. I'll take the magnet off to put it in the sandblaster so I can get rid of that. It's only got the two wires holding it. And I need to clean out inside this magnet. I can't do much with the cone. It needs to be cleaned up around the ridge here, and where the cracks are I can probably just back it up with a bit more liquid electrical tape. I'll undo these 4 bolts. That'll get the magnet out of there. Now that should come off. Yeah, there it goes. They've got little washers and spacers there, so I've got to remember that. I'll go and clean all this up, and I'll come back a bit later and we'll put it all back together again. I've cleaned up all the paint on the speaker and I've coated it with a rust-proof clear finish so it'll protect it, freeze it in time as it were. I also cleaned up this transformer and put some tape around it to protect it. I have all the nuts and bolts here, and I sandblasted all in here. Now unfortunately it took all the paint off in here as well, but that's alright. I've coated that as well with the clear lacquer, so that'll stay like that, that's no problem. So I'll reassemble the speaker. Before I put the magnet on, I'm going to try and clean out in this air gap here. I blew it out with some compressed air, but I think there's little bits of metal in there because this is a huge magnet. So I've got some double-sided tape on this bit of thin plastic. It's very thin double-sided tape. I'll just run around there and just see if I can pick up any bits of metal. See a bit there. Alright, got a bit of dirt, didn't get too much else, so it's pretty good in there. Now I've got the magnet orientated the right way, so I'll put these little spacers on. And then the basket can go on. I'll try and get the bolts in. I'll tighten these down. I'll do a crisscross pattern. I'm not quite sure why. Now I wonder if I should have put this on first. I may not be able to get this on now. See if I can get it in there. Note to self, put output transformer on first. The thing is I had a washer there. I have to take it off and put a washer on. Alright, there we go. Alright, I got them in, but it would have been easier without the magnet. I'll just give this another wipe, make sure nothing's fallen in the meantime. Alright, so the cone can go on now. I'll centre the cone by putting in 3 spacers. So if I put all the nuts and washers on now, hopefully it'll stay aligned in its new position. I'll put the other 2 nuts on. I have the 3 nuts on, they're finger tight. I'll just do them up. And here's the last one, and I'm just snugging them up. So I can take these spacers out. Perfect. Not a sound. Perfect. I still need to glue the edges down here, and I need to put a bit of felt in there to make a dust cover for that. Before I put the radio back in the chassis, I need to recover this speaker wire. It's got some old cloth stuff on here. I'm going to use the existing wire, it's pretty good. And once again I'll use this black sleeving. The new sleeving is on and it's all connected to the speaker there, so that's all finished now. Look, it's still raining. It's been raining here for 3 days. It really hasn't stopped. And I'm measuring over 400 millimetres of rain at our house. So that's about 12 inches. We're fairly lucky here, we're up a bit higher, but people are losing their homes, getting washed away in floods, they're drowning. It's awful. This set originally had a back on it, so I'm going to try and make one. I've got some hardboard here, or masonite, depending where you're from, and I've just cut it exactly to the size. I can trim it down later to suit. It had two hinges here, or one here and one here, and it had a couple of screw knobs here that you could unscrew and then open the door. I assume that was to change the batteries. Now the only photo I could find was this one on the internet, and it's just got some small holes there, but because it's got the power supply in it now, it's going to need more cooling. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do yet. I could try and recreate the little diamond shaped holes that had in it originally. I might cut a section out here, I think, to let the heat out, and another section down the bottom there to let the cool air in and let it circulate. To show that I've completely lost my mind, I'm going to try and do this little pattern that they had in the back of the original backing on the radio. I've printed this out and cut it out, and I've got it sitting on a bit of tin. I've taped it onto a bit of tin. I've got the whole thing mounted in this compound assembly, I'm not sure what you call it actually, and I can wheel that along and just adjust it. I'll use the holes or the marking on there as a gauge, so I can move that along in very small increments, drill a hole, and then if I wind this along, all I've got to do is centre it on this one here. So I'll do all that, we'll come back and see how I went with it. That didn't take very long at all, I was surprised. Now one thing, as you can see there, one thing I probably should have done in future if I was going to do it again was to perhaps use some double-sided tape, some thin tape, because the sawdust got underneath and sort of lifted the paper up, making it hard to work out. But anyway, so right, I can see some problems there. Now what happened was at the start I kept adjusting it up and down. I should have just left it and run it in a line. Even if it was out, at least the lines would be all straight with each other. But anyway, that doesn't look too bad. I think overall it looks alright. If I could fix those ones there, that one and that one, probably look alright. Okay, I kind of fixed those holes a little bit. They're not too bad now. It's not perfect, I've got to say. I've divided this back up into little sections, so there's a line there, one down the centre, one down this side as well. And I'm lining up the holes down the centre with the line on the board, so it should be pretty close. I've also clamped it down so it won't move, and I've got a sacrificial board underneath to minimise the bulging that will happen in this masonite. Okay. Now the template moved when I did that third hole, so I've clamped it a bit better, I hope. And it's still moving around. No, still moving. I'll have to work out a better way of clamping it. Okay, put a couple of screws in there. I'll keep going. Alright, let's see, it'll come out. That doesn't look too bad. Doesn't look too bad at all. Alright, I'll move along here. I'll do this one. And then I've got another, I don't know, 6 to go or something. So I'll do those and come back. I've stopped drilling the holes. I almost made a mistake there. I forgot to allow for the power supply cut out. I've got the chassis in down here. You can just see the top of it. There's the power supply. Just got it on a bit of wood there. And the speaker's got to go in here. And it should work because I measured it. Yeah, that's okay. That'll fit. So the door's got to go somewhere there. I'll mark it and I'm going to cut it out and you'll be able to get to the power supply without opening the door. So with that marked out, I'll just drill these holes, you know, appropriate to where that cutout's going to be. Bit of a change of plan here. This is where I was going to put the access for the power supply, and I've decided I'm going to move it up a bit, and then I can put one of these vents down the bottom here. I also modified the way I'm doing these, and what I've done is put a thick sacrificial board underneath. I drilled 2 holes here, screw these right down onto the board, and it keeps this hard onto the board here and the board hard onto the sacrificial board underneath, and the finish is pretty good. So take that off and it's pretty good. It's not bad. Oh, there's one here. So that's how it finishes up. I'll blow that out with a compressor, and underneath they don't bulge at all. Here's one of the first ones, and I've had to sand it and it's a bit rough around the edges, but after I've changed the way I did it, that comes out like that. I've re-drilled the holes in the template a 32nd of an inch larger, and I'll just run through them all again and hopefully get a slightly better finish, although the finish that's coming up now is pretty good. I could have done this in one step. Anyway, I'll do all that and we'll come back and move on to the next step. All right, finished drilling and I've just cleaned it up with a bit of sandpaper. It looks good. I'm very happy with the way that's come out. The next challenge is going to be attaching this to the radio case. I've put some masking tape where the original hinges were, and these are the hinges. They're little brass things. They're quite cute. So I want to keep those. The problem is I've got to attach the hinge on the edge of this masonite, which is very thin. It's about 2 millimeters. I can't, using those hinges, I can't sort of attach it that way. They need to go on the end as a butt. So what I thought I'd do is glue another piece of masonite on there and then drill right in the centre there where the two pieces meet, and then I can attach it, and hopefully that won't try and split the masonite because it's already split. So hopefully the glue will hold it. So I'll glue that on here. I've got some quick setting PVA adhesive here. Just smoosh it around a little there. It's been about a minute since I glued that on and it's taken now, so it shouldn't move when I put some clamps on it. I'll leave that for a few hours to dry. I need to mount this power supply, so I'll take this out for a second. And that, and that. So essentially what I need is a little shelf in here. I'm going to glue some strips of wood on here, put a little probably plywood shelf, and I'll put a little stay that sits on top of this box to support this edge of it. I've cut 2 pieces of wood and they're just sitting there at the moment. They're not attached. It's sitting on this box here. I've cut it out around it. The box is in the right place. I'm going to put a bit of masking tape around here to mark the area. I'll remove the paint back to wood and then I can glue it on. I've just roughed the paint off there and this fits in there like that, and I'll square that up, glue it on. I have some little screws here I'm going to put in. I've got washers too so that the screw head doesn't pull into the wood and come out the other side. So I don't want that to happen. I'll put some glue on the bit of wood there. Just make sure it's square, which it is. Now I'm going to drill a tiny little pilot hole. And in case you're wondering, the drill's not as long as the screw, so I couldn't go too far down. I've got my hand right under where the screw goes, so I can feel if anything's starting to bulge. That's fine though. Okay, I'll put this bit of wood up and put the screws in, and I'll come back again. I made a little plywood shelf. The box goes under there, and there's a little block of wood that's sitting on top of the box there. I drilled 4 holes in the ply, and the power supply will bolt on there, and there's little bolts go up into the base here. So I'll take all this apart, take the shelf off, I'll paint it all, I'll paint the little box as well. And that'll be it for that. I'm going to have a go at mounting the hinges on this door. I'm not terribly confident it's going to work. And yesterday after I painted this, I realised I'd actually made a mistake. It was about 20 millimeters too low. So I added a bit more wood in there, put a bit higher shelf in, and redid it all. So yeah, a bit of a mess on my part there. But what I'd done is measured from there to there and then halved it and then put this right in the middle. But what I should have done, of course, was measured between there and there because I wanted in the middle of those two. So anyway, I have the door here. I've drilled a hole right in the centre of the join where the 2 pieces are. So I'm not trying to split the masonite. I'm trying to get it between the 2 pieces of masonite. I'll just screw that down. I should be able to hook that in there. Yeah, it's left a fair sized gap in there. I might actually try and check this out so I can put the hinge inside the masonite there. I've fitted both hinges and I've checked it into the masonite so that it's a bit more flush. I'll try that out. Not bad. Oh, that's a much nicer gap. Okay. The gap here, look, it's okay. It might take a little bit off there and it's hitting on the top there, so I'll just trim a bit off that as well. But that'll be okay. Now the original design had 2 little knobs holding the door shut. And it had 2 brackets in there, one on the top, one on the bottom, and they mount there, and then the knob screws in here. The local hardware, which is Bunnings if you're in Australia, sells these Bakelite knobs, and they're good except they've got a very small thread on it. This is 3mm. The thread that's in the bracket works out to 4.5 millimeter. It'll be a British standard thread, but the 4.5mm fits it perfectly. So I've drilled this out and I've put in a 4.5 millimeter shaft in there. So they're quite neat. I'm happy with those. I've mounted the two brackets back in their original holes. The top one I've put a stud in from the back and it's just sticking proud slightly. I have a bit of masking tape on the back cover here. So if I close that and just give it a press, should make a mark. There it is there. You can see that, so I can back drill that now. I'll do the same to the bottom, drill the holes, I'll trim up this edge here and I'll come back. Alright, I've trimmed the door on the top and a little bit off the top there as well, on the side, and drilled the two holes. I also put a couple of little slots in there so the hot air didn't get trapped to the top of the cabinet. We'll see if our knobs fit in the hole. That one's okay. And so that one, good, very good. Okay, I'm happy with all that, and all I've got to do now is cut out the slot for the power supply. I have the power supply in backwards, so the power lead's not sticking out, and I'll just translate the dimensions onto here, or the heights. And now I can just mark it across onto the door. I've marked it all out, I'll go and cut it out and we'll see if it fits. I've put the front two screws in there just to position that power supply, and shut the door. That looks nice. The knob's in. That looks pretty good. I'm very happy with that. That looks really good. All I have to do now is apply a finish. Alright, I've got some brown Japan stain and I'm going to stain this masonite. I don't know what's going to happen. I've never stained masonite or hardboard. Should just come out brown, I'm hoping. Yeah, that's okay. I've done that side. It soaks it up so fast, it just disappears. Anyway, it looks good. I reckon that'll come up alright. I'm going to do all the edges. I am not going to do the back side of it. I would never get this stain into it. You'd almost have to spray it in, so I'll just leave that natural, and I'm going to coat the whole thing in clear, and we're just about done with that. I tried to recreate the Bush label that was on one of the photos I got off Radio Museum, and I'm just trying to age it a bit with an old tea bag. So it looks less stark than the original white I had there. Well, I better get this back to the wife before she realises it's missing. There we go, she'll never know. Well, I've got the radio running here and I've been running it for a little while now. I just want to make sure everything's okay before I put it back in the case. One of the last things I had to do was make an antenna, and it had a frame antenna originally. That wasn't going to work. It's right next to the power supply, so I've given that idea away. Plus it was too hard and I didn't know what it looked like. So I'm going to use a loop stick, and there it is there. It's got long wave and medium wave. I used an online calculator to calculate new coils, and I'll put a link in the description. And I played around making medium wave coils as per the instructions on the calculator, and they worked out pretty much exactly what that one was. I tried making new ones and I couldn't get any better, so I'm going to use that one. This is the long wave one, and I've done that and that's working very well. The former is 3D printed, which I was surprised I could do. So it's only 1mm thick in the tube, like the walls. So I was surprised that even worked. So after dinner tonight, I thought I'll give it a try and I'll see if I can get some long wave. Now I'm getting some interesting things here. I've put the radio on long wave and it's quite interesting. I'm getting... I'm getting a station. Now I think that's an AM station just being reflected back in the long wave, so that's not really there, but you probably can't hear that. There's another radio station there, but I'm pretty sure that's an AM station as well. We don't have any long wave here at all. But I'm getting that navigation beacon again. And I got some help on the last radio where people told me what it meant in Morse, so I'm now able to decipher it myself. So it's dash dot dash dot dash dash dot, which is CG, which means Coolangatta Airport. So I think that's probably about 100 k's away from here. Maybe not quite that far, maybe 80. So it's picking that up. It's nice and clear. So this antenna inside is working really well. So I think the calculation on that was pretty good, and I tuned it. I ran it up and down the ferrite rod until I got the best signal. So I'm pretty happy with that. In the morning, I'm going to mount all this back in the case. The day has finally arrived. I can put this back together. And I've been doing a few things off camera to get it all ready, just the last little touch-up bits. One of them was to put a speaker cloth on. That'll look better once the speaker's in there. I also put the little turntable back on the bottom. I installed the lipstick antenna on the top of the cabinet, and you can rotate that if you need to get a better signal. Now I made up a speaker baffle plate and I've mounted that to the cabinet with little black countersunk screws. So I think the first thing I'll do is put the speaker in. Alright, I'll try and get this speaker in. There you go. Good. I've got some nice brass washers and nuts here to put on, so that'll look nice. And I'll have to push the radio in at the same time. I should have made that power lead longer. I'll secure the power supply. I had visions of being able to plug this power supply lead in with the power supply fitted, but it's not practical. You can do it, but it's not easy. So I'm going to fit one of these little Bakelite knobs with the thread on to hold the last screw down the back of the power supply. With the knob on there, it's very easy to get in there. I've got the radio on its side there to get these screws in. Now these Wanda plugs, the old plastic caps had deteriorated, so I printed some new ones on the 3D printer. I'll see if I can leave a link to it in the description. Okay, all that's left is to put the door on. There it is. Now, almost done. All that's left to do is find some matching knobs. I found 4 knobs that'll do the job for the time being. The owner will probably have to get his own, but these will do in the time being. They look alright. Actually, they look pretty good. All done now, and wow, this took a lot of work, but it's looking good. So I'll take it inside, we'll see if it works. I said I was going to take the radio inside, but I'm going to try it outside on its new antenna. So I'll put some power on, turn it on.
If people get there, we'll bust them out to the locations of need.
Do you have any idea of the key focus and the areas they'll be deployed to today and tomorrow?
I know all over the city there's requests that we received in 100.
And it's not just drugs that he's worried about. Jenkins also sold him a few high-end wristwatches, part of the proceeds from the robberies.
And they get a flood 2 metres higher than the record flood level they've ever had. I mean, just imagine that. We're trying to deal with it.
That's the ABC News, and I cannot get that inside.
Coming together in...
7 needs barrier attention here, that's Stardo.
That's the tab or the... Wow. That's the old 4BC, that's coming in very clear.
I want you to stay next time.
I'll see if turning the aerial makes a difference.
Gonna take a ride across.
Yeah, definitely does.
Do you know how to identify asbestos? What would be your advice more broadly if people...
Wow, the radio's working unbelievably well. It's fantastic. For such an old radio, it's really good. Alright, I'll take it inside and we'll finish up. I've got the radio back inside. It's actually the next day. I did a couple of modifications to it. One of the modifications was to the little lamp that lights up the dial. The first thing I did was replace the incandescent lamp with an LCD, and the LCD is just mounted on a bit of PCB, and I've mounted that on a little bracket that I made up. And this is on any time the power supply is powered, so the owner knows that if he's got that little light there, he's got to turn it off at the power supply. Also worth noting that the position of the lamp is critical as to where this light will display. So if you're trying to do the RF alignment and you can't get the spread right, it's the position of the lamp, and it'll change the spread that the light covers on the dial. So if you're having trouble with the RF alignment, have a look at where the lamp is positioned. Now another thing that happened was the shielding on this valve fell off, and it was loose when I got it. It was really just sitting there. It wasn't glued to the valve at all, but little flakes would keep falling off. That's it there. So something I was toying with was using galvanized paint, and this paint's about 91% zinc. So I've sprayed it on here, and it is conductive. I don't know how well it's doing as a shield, but it is conductive. If I put a multimeter on it, it's about 300 ohms. You know, it's like maybe an inch away. So it is conductive. It's connected to the base all right. I'm not saying this is a perfect shield, but it's working on this one. It'd be interesting to try it on a valve that was susceptible to RF. So one last time, I'll just make sure it still works.
Stay connected with ABC.
But they gave so much to cricket.
It's responsibility of world politicians, Western leaders today.
So yeah, it works really well. It looks really good considering when I first got it, I thought it looked awful. I started this over a month ago, and I've been working on it, not all the time, but fairly constantly. There's a lot of work in this, just remaking the back. The power supply took ages. Getting the radio to work was the easiest part. I'm very happy with the way it's come out. It looks good, it sounds good, it works really well, and I've sort of restored it back to what it used to look like. One thing I did muck up was this Bush radio label. I've put Bush Receivers Gaumont British Corporation. It should say Bush Receivers are Gaumont British Products. The Radio Museum went down for quite a few hours, and I couldn't get the close-up photo of it, so I had to go off a distance one, so I couldn't quite read it, so I've mucked that up. I'm not going to change it though. This series had a couple of interesting things. The power supply for the battery radio. I've never done a battery radio. I've never made a power supply, so that was interesting for me at least. And just the age of the circuitry, the valves, and the way they made switches. The whole thing was just a bit different to what I'm used to. I've really enjoyed working on and learning various things on this radio, so I hope you enjoyed following along with it, and I hope you can join me for my next radio adventure.